Good morning, Casey with Countryside Flower Shop Nursery. Obviously, normally when we do these kind of seminars, we have you all come in and are able to be seeing everything up close and personal. But obviously we're not doing that because we're doing our 6-foot distancing and our stay at home. And you know, as we know, it's obviously working. So we have to continue to do that. But we do want to talk about fruit trees this morning. It is one of the most common things that we get, especially early in the spring, because people are thinking about harvesting later in the season. So it is something that we start out with in the spring with lots and lots of questions. And always your best selection for planting is in the spring as well. Now I do have the majority of my fruit trees in. The rest of them are supposed to be coming next week, we hope. Cross our fingers. You know, it's like that's what I've told the nursery to bring them, so hopefully they will be able to get them here. But we're going to talk about each kind of a section of fruit tree that we carry. We carry basically apples, pears, peaches, plums, and cherries. A lot of people say, well, why don't you carry like the apricots and the persimmons and all those? We're really a little far north for them to do well. First couple years that I worked here, we did carry apricots. We've replaced 95% of them in both of those years. Now that's a good reason not to carry a tree if you're replacing that many of them. So we try to carry the ones that are the most hardy for our area. Okay, one of the most popular is going to be your apple trees, which is what this one is. This one happens to be a McIntosh, which is really, really good for like fresh eating. We carry about a dozen different kinds of apples. Currently I've got like maybe 5 or 6 in stock, but as I said, the rest of them are coming really soon. One of the biggest things also that we get asked questions on is about when to prune them. You know, and this is one thing if you want to come around over this way, Kelly. You can always sometimes have like little broken pieces. So whenever you see something like that, always trim it off right away. And you want to always make sure that you get right up close next to the trunk. Okay, now the growers that we get these from, they can do a really, really good job of giving you a nice, good, basic start to your tree. The only one that I would come on and prune at this point is probably this one, because it's going to try and grow into this one. And this one you can see is obviously a much more dominant leader, and this one's going to be really low to the ground. So I'm going to do an executive decision and trim that off right now. And again, I come in really close to the stem. Now, if you also look at the very ends of these branches where they have trimmed them, you will see that they have trimmed them so that it's right above a bud and the buds point up. You always want them to be more upward pointing when you're pruning on fruit trees, or as you can see on this one, it has to be up or out, right here. With apple trees, they can be somewhat self-fertile, but really truly you get the best fare if you have 2 different types of trees. When you plant like a McIntosh, you want to do something like a Fuji or something like that with it. If you have a crabapple tree fairly close to your apple trees, a lot of times that will also pollinate it because they're all in that Malus family. Okay, but it really truly is better if you have 2 different varieties of apple trees. And when you plant your apple trees, plan on them being there for a very long time. Apple trees have a very long life. 40 to 50 years is not uncommon. So wherever you decide to put that, realize that that tree is going to be there for a very, very long time. Okay? Okay, let's then talk about cherries. Cherry trees, again, you need 2 different varieties. You have to have 2 different varieties on a cherry tree, okay? Cherry trees are going to be coming into bearing earlier in the season, where your apples are going to be your fall crop. Your cherries are going to be your midsummer, summer type crop. These are going to be a much shorter lived tree. Age on these are probably going to be more so in that 15 to 18 years. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention on apples is apples, when they start to get their apples on them, a lot of times they'll have clusters of like 5 you want to make sure that you trim that down to 2 to 3. Really, truly, the easiest way to do that is to go up next to the tree, have a little short piece of hose about like that, and just bump the trunk, and the weakest ones will fall off. So it's an easy way to do that. And then you can just clean that up and get rid of that. Cherry trees, you don't have to worry about that so much because they don't normally come in that kind of bigger clusters. Your biggest thing that you're going to have to worry about with cherry trees is keeping the birds off of it. You know, and if that is something that you have a problem with, there is netting available that you can put over the whole tree. So remember, with cherry trees, about 15 to 18 years, and then you're going to want to plan on getting new ones. Pear trees, again, they're going to be a very long-lived thing, 30, 40, 50 years, not uncommon. Pears are fairly self-fertile. So, like if you have a Bartlett, you can normally get away with just a Bartlett. If you have an Anjou, you can get away with just an Anjou. Those two are the best bearing ones in our climate, is the Anjou and the Bartlett. Sometimes what you'll find on the pears is we get into later in the season, these are going to be like your last thing normally that you're going to be harvesting. And those, sometimes we start talking about like an early frost. And if you get to that point, you can go out, they'll take a light frost, but if you're getting like a heavy frost, go out and harvest your pears, take and put them like in your garage, put down a layer of newspaper, put in your pears, and then put newspapers over the top again. And then that way they can continue to harvest. Because pears, when they're deep green, there's no way you're going to be able to bite into them because they're going to be hard as a rock. They have to start turning into that yellowish red color that they get. So it's a matter of just giving them the time to do that. And sometimes if we get early cold in the fall, that is an issue, okay? But again, these guys are going to live a long time. Okay, we're going to be talking about peaches now, and peaches are going to be more of a short-lived tree. They last about 10 to 12 years. So when you have peach trees and you're getting into that like 9 to 10 year time frame that you've had it, and you want to keep continuing to have peach trees, go ahead and be getting your new one planted. Because on any one of these that we've talked about, it takes about 2 to 3 years before you really start to get a good harvest on them. You know, the first year or two you'll get enough to make a pie, just some for nice fresh eating or a little bit. But to get a really nice where you're going to be canning and you know, freezing and things like that, it's going to take it about 3 years before you get to that kind of harvesting. Now these are going to give you a bright pink flower, which is very showy in the spring. One thing that's also really cool with the peaches is that sometimes in the fall you get kind of a reddish tinge to their leaves, whereas on the rest of these guys it's more of a yellowish color. So it gives you a little bit of color with that as well. Again, with these, you know, your peaches are going to get up like that, you know, and they're going to be nice, kind of a nice golden yellow color. You need to wait until they get just a little bit more to the goldish stage of it, not so much the straight yellow, and then that means that they're ripe. And it's really easy to tell when a peach is ready to be picked, because if you go up to this, like this on the tree, and just kind of go, it'll fall literally right in your hand if it's ready to be picked. Okay, if you go like that and it doesn't want to come off, leave it be. It's not ready. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about things that we need to use for fertilization and things that we need to use for spraying on the trees, and we'll do that down in the garden centers. Okay, now we're going to talk about blueberries. Blueberries are really fun because they have this really cool little white like cup flower that almost looks like a berry to start with in the spring. And one thing, when the foliage first comes out, it's got almost a little tint of red to the foliage, and then it gets really a lustrous green through the summer, and in the fall it goes into that red again. So not only is it a really nice looking shrub, it gives you nice fruit for eating later in the season. With blueberries, you do need to have 2 different varieties. Blueberries like to have a fairly high pH, so you do want to fertilize them with a, an acid type fertilizer, because if they don't have enough acid, they're not going to bear well. Blueberries normally take about 2 years before you start to get really good heavy bearing, and they're going to last a long time. Blueberries, like all your fruits, need to be where it's sunny. They're going to have best bear where it's sunny. These are going to get up about like that, spread about like that. I recommend when you plant them, put them about 4 feet apart, and they'll fill in and make a really, really nice shrub. Okay, then rhubarb. Rhubarb have these really big leaves on them, and rhubarb, as they mature, the stems are going to get long, like that. And when you harvest them, you're going to cut it right down here next to the bottom, okay? And then you're going to cut off the leaves. Do not eat the leaves. The leaves are not edible in any way, shape, or form, okay? And these, as you get later in the summer, they're going to send up those seed heads. When they start sending up those seed heads, that's when you need to stop harvesting for the season, because that means it's putting its energy down into its roots, so it'll make it stronger for the next season. Now these, you're normally going to be able to harvest a couple of sprouts on them the first year, but then it's going to get to be more and more every year. And with rhubarb, check them every couple days. I don't recommend doing every day, but every couple days, for harvesting once they get in and get well established. Asparagus. I remember when I first got into this industry, the first place that I worked, it was in an area which was larger city, and everybody would drive along the fence lines to go out to harvest the asparagus, because it comes up, and again, they look really pretty when they're growing, and then as they get to the point where they're doing this later in the season, and then that's when you don't harvest them. Obviously, the first year that these are in, you do not harvest fruit, but the second year you normally can. And on this, again, these you're going to check every day, because the sprouts come up that quickly. Okay, now we're going to talk raspberries. There's lots of different kinds of raspberries. We have many varieties. It starts right there, it goes all the way down there. So we have lots of different varieties to choose from. Most of your raspberries are going to have a little bit of a thorn to them, so do think about that when you plant them, especially if you have smaller children. But see, the beauty of that is, if you have smaller children, it's going to teach them to stay out of it, because as soon as they see that bright little berry, they're going to want to go in there and pick it, because that's the way kids are. But if they feel that thorn, that will help keep them out of it. Raspberries are going to get about yay so tall, and they do spread. As they're growing, they will send out little suckers from down here in the side. So when you're working with your raspberry patch, don't get in there with your hoe and be roughing it up really close to the edge of that plant, because that's where it's going to send out its new little side shoots, and you don't want to break that off. So, and here's the fun about working at a place like this, is that as the summer goes on, and some of these don't sell right away, we can actually come in and have mid-morning break, a little berry here, a little berry there. It's kind of fun. But then you have to fight with all the other staff members who gets there first. But yeah, this is going to have little side shoots that will sucker up and help spread your patch. Realistically, if you're going to have raspberries for a family, you're going to want to plant at least 4 plants. And again, space them about yay so far apart, and then that will give them room to spread and fill into each other. Again, an area where it's sunny. These can take a slightly wetter area, but really truly more well drained is best. Okay, now we're going to talk about Gooseberries. Gooseberries are a newer one. When I first look at these, it's that's a hollyhock. You first glance at it, it's no, but it's not. Gooseberries are fairly new in this area, and the fruits come in clusters. When they come on, it's a red Show them the sign. It's a cross between a gooseberry and a black currant. And it ripens more so in mid-July. This one you could get away with just planting one by itself. The fruit's very, very high in vitamin C. You know, for a lot of people who don't want to take their vitamin C pills, which, you know, that's what you eat fruits and vegetables for, to get all that good stuff. Okay, grapes. Again, we have lots of different varieties of grapes. It goes from here clear down to where that gray motor is. Grapes need a trellis. They need something to grow on. Either a trellis, a fence, and they can make very, very long tendrils, and they will make very, very long tendrils. Grapes should be pruned in very, very late winter. This is something that you're going to want to go out like the middle of March on a day when it's nice. You might be walking over a little bit of snow when you're doing it, but you're going to take that main stem as it comes up and leave like the main head right in here, but you're going to take those long, long tendrils that were there last year and get rid of all that so that it sends out new. You know, because grapes are extremely aggressive as they grow. If you don't do that every year, you're going to have grapevines where you don't want grapevines because they will spread. This is another one that you're going to have to fight the birds for a little bit sometimes, but you know, just keep a close eye on it and you should be able to stay ahead of them. This is also one that the Japanese beetles like. So if you have rose bushes or green beans and these, you're probably at some point in time going to have some Japanese beetles. Well, we'll talk about control things for those in a little bit. Okay, then we have gooseberries. We've got a couple different kinds of gooseberry. We've got the Hinnomaki and the Pixwell. Pixwell is more of a green as it matures and then goes to the reddish. Hinnomaki is a darker red, and then you know, these do really, really well. This is more of a July. Gooseberry pie, really nothing quite like it. I don't like to eat just straight gooseberries, but gooseberry pie is really quite good. Okay, then we have currants, and currants are going to give you a bright red. Currant jelly on a slice of toast or on an English muffin, nothing like it, nothing like it. These are going to get, you know, like this for height again, spread out about like that. And these, probably a couple of them for a family would be fine. It's going to take a few years before you're going to have a good harvestable crop, but you know, it's going to make you some really, really nice jelly. Okay, now we're going to talk about how to keep all of these plants that we've been talking about growing really, really well. Now, people come up and say, I want to be as organic as possible. I get that, I understand it. And I try to be the same way in my garden. If you do nothing else on your fruit trees, your berries or anything, spray them with this product. This is a horticultural all-season stormont oil. What this does is smother any of your overwintering eggs, any of your overwintering spores for diseases, fungus, anything like that. This is something that you want to apply in the very early spring before you start to see signs of life on the plant. So anytime that we're above 40 degrees, you can apply this. This is a concentrate. You do mix it with water. If you read the label, you'll see where it goes from a higher concentrate to the lower concentration. For the dormant, you want to do the higher concentration, okay? But this is something that you want to do like end of March, first part of April. This year, we're still cold enough that you could probably do it on most things. I would caution you, look at your plant to see where it's at in its stage right now. A lot of things are starting to bud, so you do need to think about that. This is something that is applied early in the spring, can also be used later as a smothering agent, and then you use it at the lower concentration. Okay? Now, to take care of things that are later in the season that come along, then you would need to spray with something like this. Anything in the chemical line that has This on the side of it, that nice pretty light tan brown color, this is an organic chemical, okay? This is for any of your fruit sprays. This is something that's going to have to be applied like every 7 to 10 days. So there's definitely some work with that. That's the beauty of doing something that's a little bit more chemical. It does not have to be applied as often. This is something that you would do every 14 days. This is the newer, not organic like this is, but the newer, how do I put this? Slightly not as non-toxic as it can be for fruits and things. This is the newer one, and this one can be sprayed every 21 to 28 days. So that gives you some choices there with spray. We also have the neem oil, which will take care of your insects and diseases. And then again, you see that's got the light tan on it. This is an organic chemical. Okay, then we'll talk about some fertilizers that will help things grow well. This is a nice granular form. We also do have the stakes that go in the ground. As your tree gets older, you might want to consider that, but when it's young, you know, when they're chunks like that or so, this works really, really well. You can also use these on your berries if you want, or we actually also have a berry tone fertilizer, which is great for all of your raspberries, justaberries, grapes, everything like that. And then for your blueberries that like more acid, this does very, very well. You can actually use the berry tone in conjunction with the acid tone. Do these like early, and then maybe follow up with this, you know, middle of May. Okay? So there you've got all the elements that you need to have a really successful garden.